All right, let's now shift our focus to Russia, where in an unprecedented move, the United States and also its NATO allies have decided to expel Russian diplomats from their nations. The 17 other allies of the United States have also decided to expel scores of Russian diplomats, and this is in response to the alleged nerve agent attack in the United Kingdom. Now, the United States has ordered the expulsion of about 60 diplomats. Germany, Canada, France and Poland have also expelled 4 diplomats each, claiming that they were operating as spies. Lithuania will be expelling about 3 Russian diplomats and also ban the entry of 44 Russians as well. Now, Ukraine will ask about 13 Russian diplomats to leave the country, and Italy has asked about 2 Russian diplomats to leave from its nation. Now, the United States government has said that out of the 60 expelled, 12 have been identified as intelligence officers who were actually stationed at the United Nations in New York. Now, the Trump administration has also ordered Moscow to shut their consulate in Seattle because of its proximity to a U.S. naval base. Now, the expelled diplomats have been given 7 days to leave. The United Kingdom has expectedly welcomed the move, and this is the toughest diplomatic retaliation by a U.S. government since 1986, when the then President Ronald Reagan had ordered for the expulsion of as many as 55 Russian diplomats from the country.
I think you're seeing an increasingly move of bad judgment by Russia. And when we see these espionage tactics that are taking place right here at the heart of the UN, we can't have that. And this is really not just us, but multiple countries saying all of these actions have to stop. This is not what we do in any other place, and it can't be acceptable for you to do this. Unfortunately, Russia is now being held accountable for a lot of things, and they have a decision.
All right, so that was Nikki Haley there, stating that it was inevitable that the United States should have taken action. She said that it was due to a provocation from Russia due to charges of espionage. Now, Russia has hit back at the United States and also the European Union. It has described this as nothing but a provocative and an unfortunate incident. Now, the Russian envoy to the United States has said that Washington understands nothing but force.
At least you don't knock with your cameras on my window, like they did by the mission.
Ambassador, could you give us your reaction to the U.S. moves today?
That's a very unfortunate and very unfriendly move. We were informed 12 of our diplomats are expelled from here, and they will have to leave by the 2nd, I think, by the 2nd wave.
Are you protesting the agreement, the UN U.S. headquarters agreement?
I don't think so. But,
have you protested the decision?
That is not me personally, but it was protested in Washington by our ambassador when he was invited to the State Department, and I'm sure it will be protested, and it is already being protested.
And also, maybe
12 diplomats. How much of an impact this will have on your mission?
Unmotivated. Sorry, what was the question?
The 12 diplomats that are leaving.
They are leaving. Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit about them?
No, we don't name those diplomats. We safeguard their privacy before they do.
All right, so that was the Russian diplomat to the United Nations there, stating that this, of course, will have serious consequences and Russia will take an adequate and a measured response to it. And to discuss more on this, we are joined in by my colleague Andy Rosgen, who joins us now from Chicago. Good evening to you, Andy. The time in the United States is about 9:37 p.m. in Chicago, where you are. And it appears that the United States, in what many people have described as almost an unprecedented sort of action, has decided to expel 60 Russian diplomats just overnight. Now, what has been the trigger for such a drastic action?
Well, a lot of folks, military analysts, retired military analysts here in the United States, really say that this was long overdue, that Russia has for a long time been conducting surveillance under the guise of diplomacy here in America. Right. That's, in fact, why the U.S. also closed the Seattle consulate, the Russian consulate in Seattle, because that consulate sits near a submarine base, and Boeing, the airline manufacturer, and critics have long said that the Russians were simply trying to spy on those organizations. And so a lot of folks here are really applauding the Trump administration. Even critics of President Trump are applauding this move, saying it was long overdue.
Right, now how correct would this action by the United States be to be linked up with what happened in Britain, where Sergei Skripal, one of the former double agents from Russia, was in fact poisoned with a nerve agent? Is this a clear, can we join the dots that it is because of that something like this has happened in the United States?
Absolutely. It is all connected. It is, and the Trump administration had talked about this for a while, about doing something. But the big disconnect here, what everyone is talking about really tonight, is that President Trump himself has not said anything publicly, has not tweeted anything at all, still seems very reluctant to criticize in any way Vladimir Putin. Now, today at the White House press briefing, the spokesman was asked, listen, will the Trump administration actually target Vladimir Putin himself and his cronies in Russia, his fellow oligarchs? And the spokesman would only say that, well, the White House will not close the door on that possibility. Right. But again, it's this disconnect between extreme, tough measures that are really being plotted here in the U.S., applauded, I should say, and President Trump, who for some reason will not come out and publicly talk about Putin or Russia.
Right. Now, one of the charges that was leveled against Donald Trump is that he was seen as someone who is close to Russia, as someone who was not willing to take on Vladimir Putin. He had come out and said, look, having good relations with Russia is not a bad thing. This is something that he's gone out on record and said it. But now we see this drastic action. Something like this has not happened since 1986. Now, Ronald Reagan was a completely different sort of a personality altogether, and we see Donald Trump bettering him. He's expelled 60 Russian diplomats. How is this being reconciled within the American polity there?
Well, actually, just an update on that, in December of 2016, right before President Obama left, he also expelled 35 Russians and closed a couple of Russian facilities. So this has been gathering steam for a while. But as you mentioned, President Trump hasn't said much about Vladimir Putin, has often praised him. And his line of thinking and his supporters' line of thinking is that old sentence, that old motto that you keep your friends close and your enemies closer. And it's the idea that President Trump has often said, look, it's better to have good relationships with Russia for things that we need them on, for a good working relationship in that sense. So either he's trying to play it both ways with Vladimir Putin, or, he truly thinks that trying to maintain some sort of cordial relationship with Putin is good for the United States. But either way, what the Trump administration did today sends a very, very clear message. Although a lot of military analysts here in the United States are saying they don't think, as tough as these measures were, they don't think that Vladimir Putin will really be deterred by them. That is yet to be seen.
All right. And just before I let you go, Andy, the fact of the matter is it is not just the United States which unilaterally has expelled the Russian diplomats. Similar action has also been taken by several nations across Europe. Why was this such a well-coordinated sort of a measure led by the United States? Is it something that we can expect of more to come, considering that Rex Tillerson, the man who believed in diplomacy, is on his way out, and replacing him is what many people have described as a war hawk, John Bolton?
Yeah, and in fact, Tillerson was very tough on Russia right before he got the axe, and the National Security Advisor before John Bolton was also extremely tough on Russia as well. It remains to be seen how John Bolton, this new National Security Advisor, will approach Russia. But you're right. The fact that this was all coordinated behind the scenes with the Trump administration and these governments otherwise also in Europe shows how tough the administration wanted to get. But again, it's just really surprising, and it has a lot of people scratching their heads that President Trump, who never misses an opportunity to come out and publicly say something or tweet something especially, has not said anything about Vladimir Putin, who is clearly behind the poisoning, if the military analysts are to be believed, and not said anything at all about that. So that remains a big question mark.
Absolutely, indeed. We'll have to leave there. Thank you very much indeed, Andy Rosden, for having joined us from Chicago and got us all those inputs. Now, it'll, of course, remain to be seen as to what Donald Trump, of course, has to say about this very big controversy that, in fact, is playing out with the United States having expelled about 60 diplomats there.